Welcome back to my inner sanctum. I'm your hostess, Countess Elizabeth, mistress of the macabre. Few things are more dangerous than exploring caves. For the men and women who travel into the depths of the earth, the risks are incredible. As they squeeze through narrow pathways, climb down steep chasms, and dive into freezing subterranean waters, they play a dangerous game with their lives. In the pitch dark beneath the surface of the world, some have become lost and trapped. On today's tale, we'll look into a few examples of people who were trapped in cave systems. So, let us go spelunking where no one has ever gone before, so we can explore our grotesque curiosity. Sterkfontein is a set of limestone caves in Gauteng, South Africa. One such explorer of these caves was Peter Verhalsel. Peter was a risk-taker. When he and his friends went cave diving through Sterkfontein caves in South Africa in 1984, he ignored every safety guideline. There was a line through the water where they were supposed to follow, but Peter's curiosity kept driving him to explore passages off the planned path. The third time he did so, his friends couldn't find him. Peter swam through a maze of tunnels and soon realized he was lost. He was trapped alone in a cave with no idea how to get out, and his oxygen was running low. In a stroke of luck, he found a small island at the end of the tunnel. He climbed out of the water and onto the island. Now at least he wouldn't drown, but he didn't have enough oxygen to find his way out. His only hope was to wait for rescue. Peter waited for hours before he gave in to exhaustion and fell asleep. When he woke, no help had come. He sat in the pitch-black cavern with nothing to eat and nothing to do but wait. It took rescuers 6 weeks to find Peter. By then, his starved body had withered to bones. He left one final message behind for his wife and his mother. In his last days, knowing that he would die, he scrawled in the sand, "I love you, Cheryl and Mom." Next, we go to a cave in Thailand, the Nam Talu Cave, located in Khao Suk National Park in the Surat Thani province of Thailand. Helena Carroll was warned not to go into the Nam Talu Cave in October 2007. It was Thailand's monsoon season, and there was heavy rain. If she went in, the locals warned her, she would not return. Helena, though, ignored their warnings. She wasn't alone. Her boyfriend John Cullen joined her, along with 7 other tourists who didn't see the risk. They soon realized the magnitude of their mistake. First, they heard a sudden roar behind them, and then they saw the water rushing in. "John and I started climbing," Helena recalled. "The first thing we saw was the tour guide and the German boy being dragged away. Then the Swiss couple and their 2 lovely girls. Helena nearly slipped, but John caught her and helped her up to a ledge. It was pitch dark in there, but they could hear incredible speed and rushing water below them. "If we stay here, we're going to die," John told her. He thought he could swim for help and bring back a rescue party. Helena stayed behind as he climbed into the water. She watched as the love of her life was pulled away by the current. Helena was alone on the ledge for 8 hours before rescue came. When they brought her out, the bodies of the others were lying in boxes on the grass. She saw the body of John lying next to the Swiss girls. It was only then that she realized she was the only one to survive. The last caving incident is a cave in Norway called Plordalen. On February 6, 2014, 2 divers cut a triangular hole in the ice of Plora and, encased in waterproof dry suits and diving equipment, slipped into the water. 2 hours later, after the sediment raised by the first divers had been allowed to settle, 3 of their friends followed behind. The destination for all 5 men was Steinugelflaget, which is a chamber within the Plora cave system. As was custom in the group, no one was at overall command, where the first diver to set off was Patrick Grovequist, one of the 2 Finns who had discovered the passage between the caves the year before. He was diving with his good friend Jari Hauturinen, who was attempting to traverse the cave for the first time. The trip was at the extreme end of a dangerous sport. When the most amateur divers might restrict themselves to dives between 30 minutes and an hour, at a depth of 30 meters or so, the trip to Steinelflaget would be a 5-hour dive with the aid of underwater scooters to depths of more than 130 meters. The deeper part was very demanding, very cold water and narrow tunnels as deep as well. It was the world's deepest slump that had been dived through, said Grovequist. At such depths and temperatures, a terror in a dry suit over the sharp cave wall could result in death. There was also the possibility of equipment failure and hypercapnia, carbon dioxide poisoning. Carbon dioxide absorbs in the bloodstream much faster and easier at depth, said Grovequist. Cave divers use rebreathers, which artificially absorb the carbon dioxide they exhale. But these can become overloaded if the divers start breathing quickly, and at depth it is more difficult for them to control their breathing. "If you have to do anything physical, swim harder or faster or anything, that's very dangerous," said Grotesque. "Hypercapnia can be deadly, but even a mild case can cause confusion and disorientation, which in a deep cave is liable to have serious consequences." At about an hour into the dive, shortly after the pair had swum through the deepest section and were about 110 meters lower than the cave entrance at Plura, Grotesque realized that Hauturin was not behind him. He went back and found his friend had become stuck in a narrow section of the cave, entangled in a cord connected to a piece of equipment. He was using his flashlight to signal distress. Hauturin seemed to be starting to panic, which meant he risked breathing too fast. Grotesque gave him a cylinder of gas to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide in his system, but while Hauturin was switching mouthpieces, he started helplessly swallowing water. To Grotesque's horror, his friend died right before his eyes, but getting agitated would put Grotesque himself at the risk for hypercapnia. After a brief effort to free the body, he forced himself to calm down. There was nothing for me to do but to continue to Steinugel-Flaget very slowly. Divers who had spent time in deep water cannot go straight to the surface because of the risk of decompression sickness, another potentially fatal hazard. The deeper the dive, the longer the decompression. Because he had stopped to help his friend, spending about 20 minutes at a depth of 110 meters, Grotesque knew he would have to spend hours making additional decompression stops before surfacing. He also knew that at some point, the second group of divers would find Hauturinin's body blocking their way. Their first diver in the second team was Vesa Rataninen. "I got to that narrow place where the first diver got stuck, and I had to decide what to do," he recalls. "My options were try to pass the dead diver, or to turn around and try to do a very long dive back, go back to the deepest section and try to survive up to the surface. I decided to go forward, and that was a very good decision for me, but it took me at least 15 minutes to get past the dead diver," Vesa Rataninen recounted. He eventually met up with Grotesque, but Rataninen struggled to pass Hauturinin's body, had added 3 hours to his decompression time. Because he began to run low on gas, he was forced to surface 80 minutes early. Soon afterward, he began to suffer muscle pains in his knees and elbows. These symptoms of decompression sickness, often called the bends, grew steadily and more serious over the following hours. Rataninen later found out that while he had been struggling to pass Hauturinin's body, the diver behind him, Jari Usumaki, was also running into difficulties. Norwegian police believe Usumaki panicked after he reached the scene of the first accident. The fifth and final diver, Kai Kakanen, tried unsuccessfully to come to Usumaki's aid. In interviews, Kakanen said his memories of what happened are pretty sketchy. But unlike Vesa Rataninen, Kakanen decided not to push through to Steinugel-Flaget. Instead, he turned around and swam the long way back to the starting point. He finally emerged from the cave in the early hours of the next day, more than 11 hours after setting off on the dive that was supposed to take 5 hours. By the time he reached Plura, he had to break a thin layer of ice to climb out of the water. All 3 survivors were hospitalized with decompression sickness. The Norwegian authorities took statements from them and closed the Plura cave. Eventually, the 3 survivors made a pact that they would retrieve the corpses of their friends. Ultimately, 2 months later, they did just that, and a group of divers went back to Plura on a mission to retrieve the bodies of their dead friends. Well, that was truly a grotesque tale. It seems that there are many instances where people get lost in caves, or they go inside a cave during an inopportune time. If you can believe this, my fiends, I have been underground during an inopportune time myself when it was raining, and I barely got out with my own life. May the souls of those lost adventurers rest in peace. Thank you for watching the video. Subscribe, like, and share if you would also like to keep exploring our grotesque curiosity. We'll meet again in the darkness of the night.